Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Talking Technical with Jannie, brought to you by For Anglers, the digital platform that keeps fishing alive. Jannie, welcome with us again tonight.
Thanks, Werner.
Today we are talking another component or another category of reels, rather, if I can call it that. And specifically, we are venturing into the saltwater type of market. And obviously, the question in my head is, when can I use a reel for normal fishing in freshwater, and when does it become a saltwater or a top end or higher level saltwater reel, and what are the features I need to look at?
Yeah, so it's quite a broad-based question that, just to answer it in a very basic way, it comes down to what you want to do with the reel. So, if you want to go and catch sharks and that, and big fish, and you're going to be loading heavy line on there, you need a reel that's more capable, and that's where a lot more strength factors come into play. It's not to say that a basic reel can't be used in salt water. They certainly can, but they have to be used within their limits. And, salt water is corrosive, so you need to look after your reels, service them more than normal. And you start seeing some features coming out in your higher end reels, which handle corrosion better. There's better strength features, all that. So I think a good place to start is on ball bearings. So let's have a look at a couple of different options of ball bearings. Again, people look at ball bearings, and a reel might have 10 ball bearings in it, and you'd think that a 10 ball bearing reel is going to be better than a 3 ball bearing reel. Not necessarily the case, especially in saltwater, because those are places where corrosion happens. So usually you'll find in your saltwater spinning reels, anything between 5 and 7 ball bearings is the norm on a high-end reel. And quite often you end up with open ball bearings. So when I say open ball bearings, it's a bearing that's not sealed, so you can see the balls inside the two races. So just a quick breakdown on ball bearings. You have what we call the races, which are the casing on the outside and inside. And around that you have several little balls that look like little BBs. And that's what those two little, your inner and outer races will then turn on those balls. And that's effectively what gives you the ball bearing. So a sealed ball bearing looks like it's going to be better, but it's not necessarily the case, because once saltwater does get in there, it's more difficult to get it out. So you don't see the problem in there. Also, if you were to pack that ball bearing with grease, it's very difficult to get grease inside a sealed ball bearing. They normally use oil there, a fine oil to penetrate. Whereas with an open ball bearing, you can pack grease in there and seal it up that way. You can see when it's sealed. So you'll find a lot of your high-end saltwater reels actually have an open bearing. And then we come to another ball bearing, and that's the one-way bearing, which a lot of reels have in them. And what the one-way bearing does is, we'll show you some pictures just now. You have a one-way system where it can only turn in one direction, and that's done by little roller bearings that look like little pillars around the races. And as soon as it goes in one direction, it's allowed to roll. And when it goes back, there's a little cam type design that stops it turning that way. It locks up immediately. You'll feel that in a lot of your reels. As you wind and you go backwards, it almost immediately bites. Whereas a lot of your older reels had a dog gear where you could go back a couple of millimeters and go clunk, clunk, and you get that noise in there. Now, some of your high-end saltwater reels have both of those. So they have a backup system as well, because they're exposed to a lot more forces. So ball bearings, one needs to maintain them well, especially in saltwater. So give them a good clean out, especially the sealed ball bearings. Use something like acetone thinners, wash them out, and then re-lube them. And if you feel any kind of roughness there, it's probably indicating that bearing is starting to pick up some issues and it needs to be replaced. Don't wait for them to fail.
If I can ask a question, and you specifically spoke about the directional bearing, obviously then prohibiting it to go backwards. Now, I see that certain of the saltwater reels does not have a backwind option at all. They are just going forward and that's it. Why is that? And why are some of them, why do some of them have an option to wind backwards and the others not?
Yeah, you see a backwind option is not good in saltwater. If you're fishing with 80-pound braid and you get into a big fish and that reel could go backwards, it'll literally break your hand. If that handle slips out, there's so much force involved there, it'll break your hand, it'll break the reel, you'll lose the fish. It's just chaos, and that's one of the big reasons why a lot of these reels don't have that backwind feature. Also, what can happen if you've got a little backwind lever there, quite possible on the boat that it gets bumped with a gunnel or something like that. Without you knowing it, it goes into backwind. So it's a feature that the saltwater guys don't want. Over and above that, you'll also see on some of the saltwater reels, they don't have an automatic knock over on the bail. So whereas this reel would knock over, Some of your saltwater reels don't have that, and the reason for that is if you were to cast out, as that lure hits or bait hits the water, if the fish picks it up and you're trying to engage there, it's going to create a lot of issues. So have a manual trip so that you could pull the rod back and actually engage it properly, because that's what we do get that from time to time. Guys asking why does the reel automatically knock over. I've seen some saltwater reels like the front stall, which doesn't even have a rotor on it. It's literally just got a little U, and that you clip your line under there and off you go.
Yeah, as a rule of thumb then, if I have a spinning reel and it does have an override for going backwards, I must know it is not really for heavy saltwater fishing. I should rather keep that one aside for the freshwater fishing, especially if I go off the boat and larger fish and 30-40 pound braid.
Yeah, so out and out saltwater reels, they remove all those kind of features. It's not to say that the reel that's got it is not suitable for saltwater, but let's call it a dual application in that case. It can do both fresh and saltwater. Then let's move on to the body material. So what we have, if we break the reel up, you're going to look at your handle, for instance. Saltwater reels are always going to have aluminium or some sort of alloy handle. The body would usually be out of aluminium, magnesium, or some sort of alloy. There are some carbon reels, like you get your C40 carbon, which is fairly strong, but you'll normally see steel materials being used. And the reason for that is it reduces flex and it gives the body a lot of strength, which is what you want. The more flex you have as you start using these strong drags that they have, the more flex you're going to get. Things start breaking and they're not as efficient when they're flexing. So I'm going to pull a reel here and show you another thing is the rotor here. When you're fishing anything from 50 pound up on braid, as your line comes in here and goes onto the spool, when you put a lot of pressure on there, you start getting flex in your rotor. Okay, so a lot of your saltwater reels, this whole rotor would be made out of aluminium. So in addition to your body and frame, you have the rotor, which is aluminium. The reason for that, you'll quite often see the guys when they're doing rock and surf fishing, that they straight stick, you see him with the rod over his shoulder and he's pulling, and you're putting a lot of stress on that reel. And if your rotor comes under pressure, he has a graphite rotor, you start seeing there's quite a lot of flex there. If you put enough pressure on there, it actually starts touching the spool. And you'll start hearing, and that can quite easily happen. I'm doing this with my hand. If I had 80 pound braid on there, and you put a lot of pressure on there, it'll definitely touch the spool, or it'll end up stressing and maybe breaking the rotor. You'll normally see alloy type materials or C40 carbon. So what C40 carbon is, a chopped carbon. So you'll see the little fibers inside it. In that whole resin complex, you've got a lot of cross meshing of those fibers. That gives you a lot of strength on your reel. But like I say, the preferred material is normally some sort of metal or alloy thereof. Obviously on the downside is as you go more and more metal, starts adding weight to the reels, but you get the strength feature out of it, and that's what the guys are looking for. Weight is not such a big factor when you're spending a couple of hours fighting a fish. If you're casting and spinning for 4 hours and landing a fish in 10 minutes, then weight becomes an issue and you'd look for a lighter reel. So other features that you have on these reels, and I touched on it just now, is the anti-reverse. It'll have a one-way bearing, but a lot of them have a dual backup system. So I've got a reel here, which is the Kuma Metalloid. And just to show you inside it, it's got a one-way bearing inside there, but it also, I don't know if you can see it in here, you see those little rows of teeth inside there?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. It's got another dual system which locks onto the outside of that. So what happens with your anti-reverse, as soon as it locks in, it's also locking on the outside of the spool. So it's not transferring stress down into the reel and stressing your gears or anything like that. Some of the other reels, like the Makara, has a dog gear, which we spoke about just now, where as it turns back, it's got an anti-reverse pin that locks onto it. And that's really just taking stress off the gears and that. Because ultimately, poppy grinder reels, because the spool is here and moving up and down the shaft, gears are here in a different plane. There's a lot of stresses, and to try and avoid these stresses, you try and mechanically lock it as best you can so that your gears don't get exposed, because gears on the meshing, as soon as you put pressure on them, they can start separating, flexing like that, and you'll end up stripping your gears. And while we're on that, one of the things I see quite often with saltwater fishing, the guys use the reel to wind the fish, and that's not what the reel's designed for. The rod should be pulling the fish and the reel should be taking up the slack. If you start forcing that reel, putting stress in the opposite direction of those gears, they don't have as much strength, and there's a chance that you can start stripping and damaging those gears. So the reels themselves have a lot of fail-safes which will handle the pressure of a fish, but they don't have a fail-safe against you. So it's important to use your rod, use the features on that reel, take the pressure, and when you wind, you're winding up slack or less pressure, okay, and then you're back into the fish using your rod. And then let's get to another feature that most of the saltwater reels have, and that's they have really strong drags. And the way this is achieved is by playing with materials and the surface area of a drag. So essentially what a drag is it's a clutch system. And I'm just going to pull out a stack of ball bearings here. Sorry, not ball bearings, of the drag washers on this reel. You'll see once the spool is removed, that silver washer inside there is part of the stack of drag washers. Normally you have about 3 steel washers, and you can have 3 either felt washers or carbon washers. And one has stayed behind there. And just to show you, it's a carbon washer there, then a steel washer, so that should be the other way around, and then another steel washer, carbon washer. So they stack like that. You'll also notice one of those has these little gears on it, and that's to lock it in place against your spool. So what we've got here are the felt washer sort of drag washers stack at the top there, and down here we have the carbon drag washer stack. So you can see you have your steel and then your carbon, steel, and your middle washer with the ears on is locks inside your spool. So these other drag washers are then moving around that, and that's what creates the friction. Down at the bottom here we have the dual force drag washer. You can see this is a carbon washer. You can see it has a very big surface area. So that improves the strength of your drag immensely, as well as stabilizing the spool around the shaft. Just quickly show you how drag might work. It turns like that. And between those 2 steel plates, one is fixed, one is turning, and in between is a washer. And the friction that's caused on the 2 surfaces is what creates your drag pressure. Now, as you tighten your drag and screw down on it, that increases the friction between those 2 as you compress them, okay? And then as you turn, you'll feel your drag tightens up.
How important is the size of those washers in terms of diameter or radius?
The size is quite important because it's surface area. So the bigger your surface area, the more drag you're going to have. And just to point out, one of the things I was going to come to just now, and that's on the Akuma reels, a lot of your saltwater reels, they have what they call a dual force drag. You have those washers that are stacked inside there. And you also have another washer down here, which lies under this plate. Okay, so that's a dual force drag, and that washer is quite big. I'll just show you one here on this reel. And you can see that black thing inside there, that's a carbon washer. So that's a lot of surface area there compared to...
Oh, yes, of course. Big difference.
Okay, it's a big difference, and it has another feature, and that's you don't just have drag washers which are inside your stack over here, which would put most of the force up here on the top of your reel. You also have a drag washer down there which acts to stabilize the spool in 2 planes. So you don't have something that's just talking off the top. It's also stabilizing on the bottom and compressing that way. So it gives you a lot more stability on the shaft. And that's why a reel like the Akuma Azores on the bigger sizes has a 20 kg drag. So despite having felt washers, okay, and there's the stack. You can see the lighter color there is the felt, which are not as strong. The big drag washer at the bottom there gives it so much more surface area together with the felt washers that it has a serious drag. And that drags around 20 kilos on the Azores reel, and on the Metroid I showed you just now, it's about 24 kilos. And just to put it into perspective, I reckon anything between 13 and 15 kilos of drag, you're going to get pulled off your feet. That's sort of the upper limits. And you can try it, especially when you're using a long, 14-foot surf rod. The lever effect there, when you think you're pulling 10 kilos, you're probably only pulling about 3 or 4 kilos at the tip. So to fully load that thing up, the leverage at the back there where you're holding onto the rod, it's going to pull you off your feet.
Jannie, is there a specific question about that? In terms of the rating of the drag, what more or less can I expect, and how do I balance it up from maybe a 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 type of a size to the amount of drag that I've got available and the type of line that I put on? Is there a rule of thumb or something? How do I select what I use with what?
So typically what you're going to see on a lot of your reels, let's call them general purpose reels, which are more suited to freshwater, you'll see drag ratings, on a 4,000 of around anything between 4 and 8 kgs. And the maximum you're going to get on those kind of reels, maybe in a 5 or 6,000 size, you might get up to 12, maybe 15 kgs. Whereas your saltwater reels, most of your drags there would be 16 to 20 plus kilograms. Some of these reels even run up to, I know on the Makara, they've only tested it up to 80 pounds, which is probably about 36 kilos. Again, you're never going to use those kind of features. So normally your saltwater reels would have higher drag ratings. And like I say, I think, my opinion, anything from 12 kilos up is more than enough for most applications. The bigger size reels normally have more drag because they've got a little bit more surface area to play with because the spools start getting bigger. But that's a general rule of thumb. It's not always the case. Just one thing I wanted to touch on there, spoke about different materials, your washers inside. Okay.
So that's a felt and a carbon.
Yeah, and the felt washer I can bend like that. Carbon washer, it's got a little bit of flex in it, but if I bend it, I can break it. And what that means is the felt is a lot softer, so it compresses more, and the carbon washer is a lot harder, so it doesn't compress, and that allows you to have a stronger drag because obviously softer material, as you squish it like that, gets a bit spongy and it's going to bottom out, whereas a harder material locks up and those surface areas are now working against that steel. So as you tighten up your drag, it locks a lot quicker. And carbon drags are a lot more expensive. You find them on the saltwater reels, but they're also a lot stronger. You start seeing your 20 kg plus ratings, there's going to be some form of carbon involved there.
Jannie, the big question is now obviously, how heavy can I load my spinning reel? When am I getting out of the range of a spinning reel and I must look at a multiplier or something like that? What's that upper limit?
There is no upper limit at the moment. All the technology that's gone into spinning reels has put them in the same class as multiplier reels. So, you have your Makara that we spoke about just now, the spinning reel. It's got an 80-pound drag on it. Your Makara 80 multiplier reel, which is a gold reel used for tuna and marlin, and that has a similar drag. It's the way that they deliver their drag that's different, and also, a multiplier reel starts using a lever drag, and it's got sometimes more room to play with drag washers because they're acting on the ends of the spool.
Yeah.
Those reels have big spools and high line capacities. But I wouldn't say there's an upper limit, but it comes down to the way the use of the reels has changed. Whereas before there weren't reels of those classes 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and now you have a lot of reels that are available at the higher end of the spectrum. So you start finding the guys catching bluefin tuna on spinning reels. They would have laughed at you 15, 20 years ago if you were trying to do that. So it's opened up more opportunities, especially on the lure and the spinning side of things. You can't sit there and cast a Makara 80W. It's not going to work. So those are trolling reels, and that's more traditional type applications for marlin and tuna. And that. Whereas this has now opened up spinning reels where the guys can cast plugs at tuna. They're catching some really big GTs and they're jigging and popping, and so a lot more versatility at the end of the day.
Okay, well, so the message is for normal or general fishing, there's almost no limitations on spinning reels anymore. I can go as much as big as I want.
Yeah, and just to touch on the maintenance of reels, if you're going fishing for shad and on the Natal coast, you can use an entry-level reel, and it's great. It'll work for what it's designed for. The only catch is you're going to have to maintain it a bit more. So in terms of that basic maintenance, rinse your reel with fresh water and not a jet, from a tap going full blast, or your Archer or high pressure washer. That's just going to get water inside the reel and bugger it up. So you just want to give it a light rinse, and that's to get rid of the salt water on the outside, and maybe take some Q20, spray some of the metal parts. That has the effect of displacing the salt water and the moisture. And then, on a more regular basis, send it in for a service, maybe 2 or 3 times a season, depending on use. And just feel, if you start feeling that there's something getting a bit rough, have it looked at and get some attention before it, breaks down completely.
If I come back from the surf, or I fished, and I know there's some salt water that was in contact, and I come back at my chalet or home or wherever it is, can I dunk my spinning reel in a basin of water or something and rinse it like that, or would you recommend not?
No, again, I wouldn't dunk it in water. If it's not a sealed reel, it's going to get water inside it, and then that water is difficult to get out of there. Dunk it in there, leave it for a while, it'll draw in. If you shake it, it's not going to come out in the same place as it went in. So try and avoid any kind of excess moisture. Best case scenario, if you want, just loosen one of the side plates and let it dry out and you get back to your trip. But water, it gets into funny places, and if there's a bit of salt with it, it's going to lie there. Even when the water dries out, the salt is still there. You'll get a corrosion process starting. So it's best to have it looked at. If you're using your freshwater reel, you're going down on holiday for December, and you get back, please have it serviced. If you leave it for 6 months, you're going to start picking up some issues.
Okay, the quicker the better, and the cleaner the better.
Yeah, the mix of materials in a reel, you're always going to end up with some form of corrosion there. So look after your stuff. A little bit of money spent now will save a lot in the long run.
Jannie, thank you very much. Thank you for enlightening us. I learned a couple of interesting things, especially on why there aren't certain features on saltwater reels. So thank you for that. And we speak to you again next week on Talking Technical.
Good, enjoy. Keep on.
Our viewers, thank you for joining us tonight with Talking Technical with Jannie Steytler from Sensation Angling. And we catch you again tomorrow night, same place, same time. Remember, you are awesome.